There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel and another Friday Reads filmed on Thursday, and I am running around like a chicken with my head cut off at the moment. So this is going to be a disorganized mess, and I've got a dog that I think I told you all that Mum's away in Victoria for the month, and Kenji and I are looking after Charlie, and he's right here, and he's a little bit unsettled. Anytime he hears a noise outside, he just has a very low bark. Ruff. So you might hear some of that. But I've got, if I don't do my Friday Reads right now and be relatively quick about it, it's not going to get done this week. So let's get started. I had a great biblio adventure last night. I went to the reading for the Indigenous poet, Sky Dancer, aka Louise Bernice Halfe. Her new collection called wîhtamawik, Tell Them, on a Life of Inspiration. And this is a collection of previously unpublished poetry and a collection of essays. So an interesting mix. My only previous exposure to Louise Halfe was on a Zoom reading with Maria Campbell years ago during COVID. And I have been interested in her ever since. My mom went to a reading of Indigenous writers in the 80s that Louise Halfe was at, and got her to autograph her story or poem in the anthology that was being launched, and has been carrying a torch for Louise Halfe ever since, so she's sorry she missed it. So I got a copy of the book and had her inscribe it to both me and my mum. I won't try to say any more about it right now, but I enjoyed it, and I'll put a link to the video of the live streamed event in the show notes. One of the reasons I'm so busy today is that I'm off to another book launch tonight, and I'll tell you all about that next week. I don't have any other personal news, and I've had a fairly okay reading week. This is the kind of week where I will know better what kind of a reading week I've had once I finish telling you all about it. I managed to get 2 videos posted in the last week, so I'm very pleased. One was another episode of Another Word, so that is something that I'm planning to continue on a semi-regular basis. And the other one was a chat from last, I think, May, my pseudo-buddy read with Robin, lovely patron and subscriber, of our chat about William Trevor's The Story of Lucy Galt. It's a wonderful conversation. I'd forgotten all the things we talked about, and it's up there now too. All right, so I finished 2 books, and I am going to check in a preliminary way on 2, one of which I didn't even tell you I was starting because I hadn't decided to start it until after I made my Friday Reads, and I'll be starting to. And of course, there'll be a book haul. I finished the Susan Scarlett novel brought back into print by Dean Street Press in their furrowed middlebrow imprint, Peter and Paul by Susan Scarlett, aka Noel Streatfeild. And this was one of the weaker ones, but it was still an absolute delight. So I'm probably going to have to give it 5 stars because I loved it, but it was deeply flawed. It took a while to get going, and then it hit its stride, and then the last couple pages, I think, botched the ending. But it was still an absolute romp. So it's about a set of twins. One's beautiful and a dipstick beyond all telling of it, and the other one's plain and full of virtue and kindness. And they're 17, and they start working in London at a dress shop, and the owner of the dress shop is from the same hometown where they live, and the nice twin, Pauline, Paul in the title, has romantic yearnings for him, but he doesn't know that she's alive. Petronella, Peter of the title, is drop-dead gorgeous, and just like you wouldn't believe what a bimbo she is, and the male owner of the shop does fall in some kind of word. It would begin with L, lust, love, we're not sure, with Petronella, and plot ensues. Yeah, it wasn't nearly as good as Babacombs or Close Peg or Clothespin. I always forget which title, what it was called, but I still loved it. I think the next one I'm going to read to Mum by this author will be under her real name, Noel Streatfeild, Ballet Shoes. I think she'd love that one. And Joe Smith and I today finished this anthology of stories by mid-century British women writers, A Different Sound, edited by Lucy Scholes. And this is one of the best anthologies I've read of short stories, I think. There was only one of them that I hated just because of the content of the story rather than the way it was written. And almost all of the other ones I loved. I will say that, and I'm going to lose 17 subscribers, half of my total subscribers, when I say this, but I am pretty indifferent to the works of Daphne du Maurier that everybody else just is orgasmic about. So I was left quite indifferent to The Birds, which was one of the stories in here, but it was a really good story. Extremely well done, just not my kind of... Her whole vibe just leaves me a bit cold. But she's a wonderful writer, and the hits for me were, I've already raved to you about, The Cut Finger by Frances Bellerby, who I'd never heard of, and that story was just incredible. Listen to the Magnolias by Stella Gibbons that I absolutely loved and I've talked about. The Thames Spread Out by Elizabeth Taylor was just amazing. I've never read an Elizabeth Taylor short story. Want to read more of those. I have very mixed feelings about her novels. I think I've spent more time talking about the ones that I didn't like. And I should add, there was one called The Land Girl that I hated by Diana Gardner. And it was about a land girl, and I'm interested in them. I just read a memoir last year about land girls, and I've read other fiction about land girls. The young woman who went to the farms during World War II in the UK because the men were all fighting. And this one was about one, and she was just a mean-spirited young hussy who took a dislike to the woman, the farmer's wife. It's an antiquated term, but in the 1940s, I think it would still apply, the farmer's wife. And so she manipulated the farmer so it made it look like she and the farmer had slept together, but that did not happen. She just wanted to hurt the farmer's wife. I don't like mean-spirited stuff like that. What the hell is that doing in there? It's just garbage. Getting a little moralistic in my old age. I just thought, what a nothing burger of a story. There are mean-spirited people in the world. I don't care to read about them. All right. The one that I've started that I didn't think I was going to start is because my Zoom chat with Amy of Zoe Beck about Belinda by Maria Edgeworth has been bumped about 10 days, I think, maybe 2 weeks, which meant I didn't have to spend so much time reading it. I don't like reading a book in big, concentratedly, like all I do is read that book for 2 days. I don't do well. So I was happy when it wasn't me who asked for an extension, and I was very happy to grant one to her. And so then I thought, well, I don't have to always listen to Belinda when I'm on my treadmill. I can put in something that's Irish. And so I've chosen a collection of short stories by Claire Keegan that I hadn't yet read, Antarctica. And I'm, I think, near the end of the second story. So I'm listening to it on the treadmill every second day, and the other days I'm listening to Belinda. And the title story was quite dark, and I liked it. It's a tale of, not a kidnapping, but an unlawful confinement. This married woman decides that she wants to experience what it's like to have a one-night stand with somebody else. And the guy that she meets ends up being a bad guy. And so it's very dark, not violent, but dark. It really did a number on me. But it was so well done. But, yeah, not my favorite of anything I've read by Claire Keegan. But I think I'm going to not regret starting to listen to this. What has completely taken my breath away in terms of what I've started is this Welsh novel, Richard Llewellyn's How Green Was My Valley. Oh my God, from the very first chapter. The narrator is leaving home, and it seems like he's in some trouble, which is why he's leaving the only home he's ever known in the valley. It seems like he's never coming back, and then we get the whole story of him and his family. So the reader may not find out until the very end of this quite lengthy novel why he's leaving home, but the portrayal of the family life is so lovely. The reason why he's leaving is probably something dark and negative, but the family life is so wholesome. And I've never seen a portrayal of such a loving father that is an interesting character in literature. That's hard to do. And boy, I'm just immersed in this by page 28. I can't wait to continue with it. Okay, I'm going to start 2 more books. I haven't even started all the books that I told you I was going to be starting last week. So I am Charlie. I'm in that blissful place of, oh my God, my reading life is out of control. What fun. My patron and a big supporter of this channel, Katie, and I are doing a pseudo-buddy read of Elizabeth Jolley, The Well, which is a book I've had on my shelf for maybe 25, 30 years, longer. Published 1986. I bet I've had it almost that long. I heard her interviewed on a CBC book show, probably with Eleanor Wachtel, back in the day, and I loved that interview. This is about a spinster, Hester Harper, on an isolated farm in Western Australia. How lovely. This would also qualify for Spinster September. And now that Joe Smith and I have finished that fabulous short story anthology, we are going to start a novel from Charcoal Press, Theatre of War by Andrea Jeftanovic, translated from the Spanish by Francis Riddle. I haven't heard many people talk about this one, but it sure looks interesting. It's a debut novel from a Chilean author. The story starts with the conflict in the Balkans, and then the family flees to South America to make a new life, so that explains the Balkan-sounding surname, Jeftanovic, and I'm quite stoked to begin this one. All right, book haul time. Here is a collection of short stories by Katja Oskamp, a German writer. It's Half Swimmer. It's translated by Joe Heinrich. She was my mystery guest, one of my very first mystery guests. I'll put the link to that in the show notes, because she translated the novel Marzan Mon Amour that won the Dublin Literary Award. This collection, she talked about the fact that she'd just gotten the contract to translate this one, and unfortunately this one has a very low rating on Goodreads. I don't know why, or whether I will agree. There's a little explainer here in the opening pages. Halfschwimmer is a noun, which of course translates into half-swimmer. A German term for one who has recently learned to swim, but hasn't yet mastered the technique. I'm a half many things. I'm a half swimmer. I'm a half, you name it. Here are the opening 2 chapters from the first story, called Rolf and Hopsy. When I was a child, I had a hamster called Rolf. My parents bought him because I had to make do without any siblings. Rolf would sit under a pile of wood shavings in a glass enclosure by the door. He mostly slept. Sometimes he'd eat something. He never used his wheel. The best thing about Rolf was the way he could get my father to throw himself on the floor and stick his head under the cupboard. Apart from that, Rolf was a disappointment, and he soon died. Then I got 2 black dwarf rabbits, Hopsy 1 and Hopsy 2. The rabbit hutch was on the balcony, clear varnish peeling from its wooden panels. I only cleaned the hutch when my father forced me to. I'd bring the dwarf rabbits into the living room for hours every afternoon to sit them on the carpet in front of me and pull their back legs. It was called Playing Wheelbarrows, a well-known children's game. That's a very inviting opening to the first story. Next is a queer Latino novel, Hombrecito, I think it would be pronounced, by Santiago Jose Sanchez. Debut novel that I heard a lot of good things about, came out in 2024. The author is a queer Colombian-American writer. Their pronouns are they, them, and this is their debut. It's about a young queer immigrant living between cultures. I like that sort of thing. Here are the opening 3 short paragraphs. The boy is ready at the window when the last bell rings. He tightens the straps of his backpack and hugs his lunchbox close to his chest. The cars at the end of the schoolyard melt into a line of glistening metal. Today, she forgot she is a mother. Either she's first in line or not there at all. He's worked out the system to these 2 options. Tugging the lapels of his uniform, the boy squeezes his eyes shut until they sting. Small pains like these sustain him. He thinks hard because he has to. He has to picture her face, imagining her there, willing her to his side. Then she'll appear. He starts with her eyes and nose, which are identical to his, before he reaches a deep, glowing blank, unable to remember the parts of her that aren't his. I think that's quite powerful. Here's another novel by one of my mystery guests, with the intriguing title, This Room is Impossible to Eat, by Nicole Hohotorova, translated by Julia and Peter Sherwood. And Nicole was my mystery guest back in the day. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. This is quite a dark novel about a quote-unquote adult relationship. She is 19, he's 57. They've known each other for years. He was her art teacher, and it's a very power imbalance, creepy guy controlling a younger woman type of story. Sounds incredibly powerful. Nicole is a Slovakian writer. Here's the opening paragraph. And they're not numbered chapters. Each perspective gives the age of the character when this part of the story happens. So 50 is the age of the art teacher. Here's the first paragraph. Someone is pulling out Ivan's hair. Someone invisible. Ivan picks up the strands one by one. White hairs are difficult to spot on a white sheet. He throws them into a bin on top of some rotting fruit. He thinks of his daughter and how she used to smash to pieces the presents he'd given her. How he would pick up the broken bits one at a time and keep them in a drawer while she sat in her room sobbing. He recalls how she sat there sobbing after Freddie Mercury died, and Ivan held her in his arms until she fell asleep. He was glad that someone had died, as it gave him a chance to be a good dad. He also felt glad at her mother's funeral, as he could hold his only daughter in his arms, glad that she had come home for a few days at least. And after she left, he had to fish out her hair from the bath plug hole, and was glad again when the hair twisted itself around his fingers. He could barely peel it off and flush it down the toilet. What a shame that children, unlike strands of wet hair, peel off so easily. That's powerful and very disturbing, oh my goodness. And the last one for today is a newly published book set in Yellowknife, put out by Freehand Books, Northern Bowl by Michelle Swallow. This was on my most anticipated list, and I have it in my hot little hands. It's bitterly cold, dark January day in Yellowknife. A down-on-his-luck fisherman, Jacques, is accused of stealing a prized moose head, and is given an ultimatum. Find the moose head before midnight, or else. Opening 3 paragraphs, quite short. Give her, Frenchman, Jacques' buddies shouted. Drunk, yelling and clapping, they banged the worn tables in time with the music. Jacques Panache had been dancing in this weekly jigging competition since he'd first snuck into the Gold Range bar at 16. The dingy bar, with its flashing, coloured stage lights, wood paneling, and happy tipsy crowd, was as familiar to him as his living room. Maybe more. As with most bars in the north on a Friday night, the crowd was mixed. The old-timers with the college students, the lawyers and the carpenters, the dancers and the drinkers, the regulars and the tourists. They all had their representatives here. Jacques lifted his legs in time with the music, trying to keep his movements fluid and light. Alex was the third best fiddler in Yellowknife, but she was number 1 tonight. The musician was playing an old bluegrass tune about a train, Orange Blossom Special, Jacques' favorite reel. Her bow scurried back and forth across the fiddle as she sped up the train. The rest of the house band, a guitarist, a drummer, and an unsmiling bass player, kept a steady rhythm following her lead. That's quite lovely. All right, I did it. Thanks for watching.